Alright guys, this issue has inspired me to come a bit more forward with my identity as I will release my voice. I am going to lend my support in freeing Milo and explain why this needs to happen from my views as a general liberal but cultural libertarian. This particular happening of Milo being banned from Twitter freaks me out. For such big reasons, I can't really even explain them without saying them out loud. So here goes. Milo Yiannopoulos was banned from Twitter, if you haven't heard, from writing a negative review of the female Ghostbusters movie, in particular highlighting his annoyance with Leslie Jones, the black woman who was one of the stars. He got in a bit of a spat with her, and she became very publicly agitated, not just with him, but with many of his fans and other random trolls. All hell broke loose. There were, in fact, plenty of racism and I guess sexism. I don't know if I really care, but there was. Fine, sure. And then his account got disabled, so we can't read it anymore, which is a favorite tactic of the regressive left. Censor somebody and then give their version, the regressive left's version of what got them censored. Of course, you can't read what actually happens, but you'll have to take their word for it. If you read the article that came out in the New York Times about it, they make it sound like Milo was this mastermind behind some sort of coordinated attack. And let me be one of many who is probably calling bullshit on that. Milo did not rally any minions like they claim. Not only did he not have to, because his fans already had a problem with the new Ghostbusters movie, but Milo is way too smart for that. I have a love-hate opinion of him because I am not a Trump supporter and I think he is a bit harsh on Black Lives Matter as a whole. Though I will admit that he is spot on most of the time when he ridicules feminists, and I greatly admire him for playing the social media provocateur game excellently, as it has been a hobby of mine over the years as well. See, what both Milo and I know is how to incite a reaction, but to follow the rules at the same time. Every time you get in trouble for a supposed violation, you make for absolute certain that you never do it again. And Milo has been accused of rallying fans to go attack people on Twitter more times than feminists have actually done it. He's not Stephanie Guthrie trying to smear Bendel Spur and Gregory Allen Elliott. He's just a jerk who didn't like a movie and an actress. And seriously, does anybody really like Leslie Jones? She seems like she's probably a nice lady in person, and I do feel bad for her because I think she was drastically unprepared for this. And she's a pawn in a bigger battle she likely doesn't understand at all, in my opinion. But she's just not funny. She's embarrassing and truly isn't an outdated stereotype like Milo said in his review. So that's what happened. Now, there's two major points I need to cover here. The second one is the bigger issue, which goes all the way back to the motherlode of free speech issues, which is net neutrality. But I'll get to that after the first issue, which is the destabilization of Twitter and privately owned social media as a whole. See, what we have going on, and what has been going on for a while, has been a culture war on social media. But it hasn't really been much of a war exactly. I would probably say it's been more like an attempted cultural genocide of conservatism by the regressive left over the past few years. I'm sure you've noticed. And it's employed every dirty tactic it could to try to annihilate cultural conservatives out of existence. But did that work? Absolutely not. I would speculate that it backfired, and now there is an entire demographic of young people who seem to believe that being a Republican is some sort of punk rock rebellion, often knowing very little about actual policies. And the conservative leaders have picked up on that and tapped into it. Milo brags in his speeches that this is going to be a cultural election and that his followers don't care about many policy issues besides, of course, freedom of speech, because that affects them directly. So what we have going on right now is a culture war between the regressive left and the neoconservatives. But what you have to keep in mind is that this war needs to continue the way it is going up until this election is over. Why is this? Well, I'll explain it to you. See, Twitter and Facebook are not open markets for free expression of ideas. And the conservatives have been complaining about that for a while. They are both privately owned, and there is ample evidence to show they are very much linked to politics. You can imagine them rather like a video game version of free speech that simulates the idea. Except they are really good simulations, and a lot of people are given the illusion that they do really have free speech. But make no mistake, if you sincerely threaten the establishment, you're gone. People say, well, what about ISIS? What about the ISIS accounts? Or what about the Black Lives Matter accounts that threaten people? Well, for one, the bigger establishment, they don't really care about that stuff. They want those people to stay in the public eye where they can keep track of them. If the government intervenes and censors them, it will just force them underground, and they'll get better at whatever brand of heinousness they practice. Secondly, each of these groups largely powers the establishment, because ISIS is more useful to the American political masses to keep them afraid. They are more useful to keeping people afraid than they are a sincere threat to our nation at the moment. And Black Lives Matter has done a pretty awesome job keeping lower income people divided and not universally working towards a common good, like the Occupy movement or the Sanders candidacy attempted to achieve. Now, social media can't last forever in the way that we know it, and you just have to face that. It is getting out of hand, and the politicians know it. It's mobilizing people, it's uniting people, a lot of chaos. I want to give a shout out and recommendation to Jim, Mr. Metikur, or whatever, however you say that, Mr. Metikur, aka Internet Aristocrat. He gives a really in-depth description about how he thinks this will go down, and I recommend people watching his channel. Basically, that they'll come for people left and right, carefully chipping away at any voice of dissent on social media until none are left, and eventually you'll be the one on the chopping block. It's very 1984, and I definitely think he is likely correct. However, we are now facing a more immediate concern, which is the destabilization of this cultural civil war, which will happen if Milo, who is probably the biggest head for the opposition to the regressive left on Twitter, if he is taken out, it will be like Obi-Wan Kenobi. His martyrdom will be so huge that it will inspire happenings we have not yet seen, happenings that I am personally rather afraid of. If the war within the virtual video game world of freedom of speech can no longer happen, if we can't even pretend to have this conversation publicly anymore that Milo is such a big part of, that means that people on Milo's side will feel silenced. And when they feel silenced, they will take to other means of communication and perhaps forms of cyber terrorism. Keep in mind, this movement Milo has tapped into is full of bright, young, tech-savvy people with a lot of time on their hands and a curious spirit. And if you don't know hackers, let me tell you, they tend to be younger than older. That all said, if Milo becomes a martyr and his fans ripple throughout the internet, it could lead to a bigger, creepier reaction from government. And there's where the net neutrality thing comes in. They are already making troll accounts to defend him. They already hack people's social media. It's these same types of people. What happens when they hack a politician's social media? What happens if they hack all of Twitter? What happens when the major security breaches become completely public in real time? Do you legitimately believe that the government would stand for that? Furthermore, what does that mean if it were to happen during an election? What if they seriously just cut off our Facebooks, Twitter, YouTube, and everything else right in the middle of this election? Yes, I'm taking this very far, but I think you should too. At the very least, I think you should be fighting to get Milo his Twitter account back. Love the guy or hate the guy, but the culture war must continue. We don't want it turning into a full-blown cyber war at this point in politics. Though truthfully, it will probably happen eventually.